Welcome, everybody, to episode 89 of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, but my friends call me Shitface. And I'm coming to you from Brooklyn, New York. But I am not the only one who is scouring the streets trying to get my hands on some white man. No, who else is here with me?
Well, it is I, Steve Guntley, the host who, when he's bad, he's really bad. This is the podcast about white men, lumpy heads, and Nicole addictions. That's because this is the podcast about Underworld, aka Transmutations, another grisly thriller from the mind of Clive Barker, a guy who brought us the amazing priest-pissing adventures of Rawhead Rex. The scene, whatever reason, I didn't notice the first time watching that movie that he pissed on a priest, and the second time I watched it, that's all I remember. But either way, it's in my head now.
Well, that's George. That's George Pavlou's his signature moment.
That's all his move. That's his. He's planting his flag with that one. He's like, "This is my rosebud moment." We're very excited to be back in Clive Barker territory, and we are very excited to be joined by a couple of very cool guests. Jared, who is joining us here to transmutate our cares away.
Wow, well put. We do have two very fun guests with us today. Our guests are Amber Kloss and Marc Gottlieb. And for those of you who may not be familiar with them, Marc is a screenwriter and a director. He has a movie called Witch Hunter that has Doug Bradley in it, speaking of Clive Barker connections, which was released in October. And what I know about him, he's a perfect guest for the show because he's a horror lover, and he's even got some interesting connections to this movie too. So, Marc, it's really nice to have you here. And Amber is an actress from LA, and she volunteers with the American Cinematheque. I was going to say we wrote
There's
that.
So many ways to say that.
And, you know, I pride myself usually on doing a guest introduction that's not written down, because I kind of I look at it and I go, I'll get that, and then that word I was like, nope, got to read it, and
Fair enough.
It came
Fair
out
enough.
painfully labored. But you're a great guest for the show too, because I know you love cats. I also love cats, and Brian De Palma and horror movies. So after that very long-winded introduction, Amber, Marc, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. It's an honor to be here, and I'm very excited to be talking about this film in particular with you guys.
Well,
amazing.
Yeah,
because it's quite an oddity in its design and its execution.
I'm gonna put my thoughts out very quickly and just kind of summarize what I thought of this movie. Dry run for Nightbreed.
Yes.
Doesn't this feel very, very much like this
Absolutely.
is the prototypical version of Nightbreed before he got a budget and kind of locked down what his aesthetic is? That was the thing that was really most striking about this movie to me.
Well, this is Nightbreed when Clive Barker said, "Hey, I want to make Nightbreed," and he went to producers who were not trying to make the One Night in Bangkok music video.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
To be clear, I love Nightbreed. That's not totally a knock, I like the idea that he's stumbling upon here, but it is weird how much of a dry run this feels like for that much more kind of cohesive vision. But I'll get into that as we go on. I would love to know from you guys a little bit about where your particular fixation with horror started, and what your relationship to this movie and Clive Barker are.
Well, for me, I was watching horror films, I think like we all were, way too young. I started with watching a lot of, it's all going to the video store, renting stuff on VHS and just going from one end of the shelving to the other. I was fortunate.
We haven't heard that story yet. That's been that's exclusive to you. We have not we have not shared nor heard that story yet.
That's why I'm sort of glossing over that part of it. But it's I was lucky that my mother was into horror films as well, and so she would let me rent the stuff that perhaps my father wasn't all that keen about me watching, and she was also the one who would get me into R-rated movies. So I got to see things in theaters that maybe others wouldn't have had a chance to do. But from there, I started finding that I enjoyed the studio, that kind of stuff. But then I started finding more indie and the more like Italian horror and those things. And so that's where my love of horror really kind of started to take off, because I started to say, well, there are so many different genres. There's so, I probably saw a lot of slasher films, a lot of monster movies, but then as you get older, you start to seek out the more strange, the more obscure, the weirder stuff. And that's sort of kind of the foundation of stuff I like today and the stuff I like to make today as well.
Very hard, same.
Yeah.
And I'd say for me, it's almost the opposite for him, because I did not have a mother who let me watch our parents. I grew up in a religious household. So when it's like I'd have to sneak it at my friend's house. It's like I always really wanted to see it, but I was also scared. So when I was in 3rd grade, my best friend's older brother had Poltergeist, saw it and was absolutely completely terrified. So much so, it's kind of embarrassing. And as a kid, I was embarrassed about it because I thought it made me not cool. It scared me so bad, I had to go see a therapist for it.
Oh my God.
And then, of course, that means I had to reveal to my parents I had been sneaking these horror movies. But then, funny enough, fast forward to when I'm in college, I'm doing a play up in Sacramento, Northern California. The director is friends with Zelda Rubinstein.
Oh, wow.
She flies up to see the play. And I thought that I had been outgrown these fears. And I was like, oh my God, she's here. And I'm like, oh no.
Can I ask you a question? Did she call you child?
Oh, that's amazing.
It's so funny how you go, I'm a grown-ass adult, I'm not scared by that stuff. And then all of a sudden something kind of triggers. You go, and then I swore, I'm like, I don't know, I can watch a million other horror movies. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be ready to watch Poltergeist again. I go and revisit it again 6 years ago, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was just as terrifying to me. And but it's become one of my favorites. So it's kind of funny how everyone's kind of got that one that maybe, that is on their timeline of movie or horror or whatever, and that's always kind of been the one for me that kind of cracked that egg for me and whatnot. So
it's that rare gem, and Poltergeist is one of those for me as well. When if you're people like us, you watch so many horror movies and you dissect the tropes and you know when the beats are coming and you know when all the punchlines and setups are going to happen. And it's just makes them that much more special if they still have a little bit of that primal power to scare you.
Right.
Yeah. It's
right.
That's, I don't know, that's why I think people are into horror as much as they are, because you're seeking just that little cinematic hit every once in a while. And Poltergeist is definitely one of those that does that for me.
Yep.
Oh,
and then when I think about that movie and how many years later we have all these fancy gore effects, special effects, I'll say one thing and I'll leave it at that. But something like, because it applies, I feel like, to so many horror movies, or like Underworld, it's not even about the special effects, but with horror, I think it's just what's effective sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You don't, even without a drop of blood, how can you be, terrifying? And I feel like that's a perfect example.
That's a good point, because one of the movies that I remember seeing, again, way too young, was Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, after having grown up on all the Paramount horror stuff, the Friday the 13th and all the other stuff, watching that movie was jarring, because there was nothing glossy about it. There was no studio shine to it. It looked like they were filming some people really killing people or really, torturing these people. And, when you're at that young age, you feel like there's something wrong about this. This is too dirty and gritty, and it was very effective. And again, it's a movie that has very little blood in it. It's
almost
really
none.
a lot of it.
It's crazy.
Right.
And it's everything that your mind is doing. And that from a young age, I will always remember seeing it for the first time. And for years, I was like, oh, I don't like that Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. And then, years later, I grow up and get my teens, and I'd be like, oh yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's absolutely brilliant.
I sort of had that with Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
When I saw that the first time, I was like, okay, I have not passed all of my prerequisites. This is advanced stuff. Like, I'm not ready for this.
Right.
I've told the story on the podcast a bunch of times already that, like, my gateway movie into horror was Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors.
Oh, nice.
I was about
yeah.
second grade or so when it came out, and like I remember it was coming out on video in my local video store. Was great. One cool, very nice thing about growing up in New York City was that I had a mom and pop video store that was on my like block under the elevated subway tracks. It's very picturesque, you know.
Nice.
And they had a cardboard cutout of Freddy, and I was like, wow, I don't know what that is, but I want to know more about it. And I watched it and then fell in love with the movie, became obsessed with the movie, with the character. I got my cousin who had just turned 16 to take me to the movies to see part 4 when it came out.
Okay.
And so I was a kid, you know, and it was like, again, like you were saying, Mark, like movies you definitely shouldn't have been seeing in the theater.
Right.
But to Amber's point about they're not necessarily even needing to be blood. Like, I don't think I ever really said this on mic. Like, I was legitimately scared the first time I watched Halloween. And I didn't see the first Halloween until about 5 to 7 years after I kind of discovered Freddy, then watched a bunch of Freddy, a bunch of Jason. I think I saw like Halloween 4 and 5 before I even saw the first Halloween, and I was like, well, these are not I was like, these aren't good. Michael Myers is boring.
Right. Yeah.
And then I moved from the city into the suburbs, and I was probably like 13 or 14, and Blockbuster was selling one of their Blockbuster Presents or Selects repackaged videotapes for $2.99, and it was Halloween, and I went, you know what, I'm gonna get this. It's a classic, everyone loves it, like I should own it, even though I don't really like Michael Myers. And I went home and I watched it, and I had just recently moved from like a busy city to like a quiet cul-de-sac. And I put that movie on in my bedroom by myself, and it scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Because I was like, for the first time, I really felt like an intruder could walk into my house from the darkness outside.
Absolutely.
And there's no blood really in that movie. It's just,
yeah,
and I go to see it. I go to see it all the time in like screenings, revival stuff, anniversaries. And I always try to look for people who I think are seeing it for the first time. And to speak to your point from before, it's still effective.
Absolutely.
Like it still kills.
And to be clear, we're bringing up some of the greatest horror films ever made, and it's not
Underworld
necessarily to connect to Transmutation.
Before we transmutate into the next segment, I want to ask you a question, Jared. So you saw 3 first, and by the time 3 rolls around, he's in the Shecky Green era, with these being really funny, and
that's like kind of the beginning of it. Yeah,
that's the start of it. So when you see 1 after 3, what was that like for you in terms of that?
So I saw 1 and I went, ooh, that's like dark and grim comparatively. You know, there's no real, like, it's a little more relentless in tone. There's definitely humor in part 3. And then by like with part 4, it's like, okay, like now it's definitely, but I felt like when I went to see part 4 in the theater, like I was going to a concert. Like I thought I was going to see like my idol on stage. Like I couldn't wait. But I remember, seeing 1 and being like, oh wow, this is like darker. You don't see Freddy as much. He's not talking. And then I saw 2 and I went, well, I don't really know what to make of that.
Right.
That's a whole other can of worms. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Well, I want to talk a little bit about Transmutations. Let's learn just a little bit about the backstory, and then I want to hear about your connection to this movie, because it's a fairly obscure movie at this point. Not too many people have connections to it for one way or another, but let's find out a little bit about Transmutations, aka Underworld. It was released November 29th, 1985. It's directed by George Pavlo. It's written by Clive Barker and James Kaplan. And it stars Denholm Elliott, Miranda Richardson, Stephen Burkhoff, Larry Lamb, Nicola Cowper, and Art Malik. Now, this is our second time talking about a team up between director George Pavlo and author Clive Barker, but technically this is their first collaboration. Their second film was 1986's Rawhead Rex, which we covered fairly early-ish in our run, or pretty early. It was a while ago. Pavlo was an interesting guy. He got his start making short films, which in the early 80s in England were actually played as kind of accompanying films before like major blockbuster releases, kind of the same way we used to run like cartoons in a newsreel. You know, so this was a time in cinema where, like, if you were a short film director, you had a pretty clear, big audience that were seeing these films. So his movies were playing before things like Trading Places and Conan the Barbarian and a couple of other like fairly big early 80s movies. Now, this is his first feature film. Now, the director met Clive Barker at a dinner party. Said they both just started talking about movies nonstop. And he asked Clive Barker to write a screenplay for him. He'd never done it before, but he gave it a try. And this is the result. Now, over in England, this is just called Underworld. Sort of, yeah.
Sort of.
Over in England, this is just called Underworld. This was a pickup from Empire. They didn't produce this, but they did distribute it in the US. But of course, Charles Band had to put his own little spin on the title. So Underworld became Transmutations. A title that I don't know if it's better or not, but it does avoid the SEO problem of like the Kate Beckinsale movie. Like, so if you're trying to find this movie, you need to specify the year so you don't get some Len Wiseman bullshit. But this film itself got a very, very small theatrical release. It got a little positive attention at some film festivals. It was the first horror film chosen to lead a late night slate at the London Film Festival, played in competition at the Paris Cinema Fantastique. And this followed the regular Empire path of getting a very small theatrical release and then a big push on VHS, where it still kind of struggled to find an audience over here. I think now it's relatively obscure outside of A, the association with Clive Barker, and B, some very surprising casting. Some very august British thespians are appearing in this very silly movie about mutant drug addicts.
Right. It's almost like it plays very much like it's like the cast of Chariots of Fire or something.
There's a bit of that.
Right, that's a good comparison.
The top billed actor is Denholm Elliott, all right? And now Denholm Elliott in 1985 got an Oscar nomination, but not for this, if you can believe it. The Academy, in their short-sightedness, preferred his performance in The Room with the View. We, of course, know him from the aforementioned Trading Places, and, of course, as Marcus Brody in the Indiana Jones films. He's kind of just a beloved British character actor. He passed away back in 1992, but I always love him. I just started playing the brand new Indiana Jones game. Just released, and it's just nice seeing like a representation of Marcus in the game. I'm just like, oh, I love that guy. We also get another future Oscar nominee, Miranda Richardson. Here she would go on to get nominations for movies like Damage and Tom and Viv. She would be in The Crying Game and Sleepy Hollow and David Cronenberg's Spider. A lot of good performances.
Well,
I feel like the Transmutations to Crying Game pipeline is a very obvious one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, obviously. Yeah. It's a real clear path.
Yes, of course.
A few other reliable names. We had Stephen Burkhoff, a.k.a. Victor Maitland from Beverly Hills Cop. We have Art Malik, who would go on to play the villain in James Cameron's True Lies. At least that's what I mostly remember him from. But he's done a lot of British stage and television.
Okay.
Yeah. But I just watched that movie like an infinite number of times when I was a kid, and I will always remember him just strapped to the missile and "You're fired."
Right.
But of course, our ostensible heroes here are Larry Lamb and Nicola Cowper, who are not really big names over here. Larry Lamb has been a reliable British TV actor. He was on 150 episodes of EastEnders, so like 2 days worth, something like that. I forget how much that show puts out. I think there are some networks that just run nothing but EastEnders.
Right.
And Nicola Cowper, again, she's still around. They're both still around, still working pretty regularly in British TV mostly. But I was not familiar with their legacy. I don't really know who they are, but I was surprised to see Larry Lamb, this very kind of pug-faced, like pugilistic-looking British character actor with full-on Rufio stripes.
Yes.
It was a real move. It was a real move, and I did not expect that.
Yeah.
Now, okay, I've yammered way too much. I would love to hear about a little bit about your guys' relationship and connection with the Clive Barker and with this film in general.
Well, it's funny because when you had asked us to be on the show and you'd given us some titles to consider, I thought Underworld would be a good choice. I used to have the poster when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
So you're the one.
Yeah, I had, because the video stores again that I was always in would give away all the posters. So I would go home with whatever we would rent, and then I'd have like 8, 9, 12 posters, maybe a standee or two they were giving away.
Oh yeah,
I had all this stuff when I was younger, and I remember having that poster on my wall because again it was Clive Barker, and I was like, oh okay, I'm familiar with it. And but I was always, and this was the Transmutations video VHS version of the poster.
Cool poster.
And so yeah, and so I was familiar with it, and then I know that the film's other title was called Underworld, and I know that because the band Underworld, one of my favorite bands ever, who I've seen 20 some odd times live in concert.
Oh wow!
And and I'd never seen this film, and I was like, well, wait a minute, if I'm going to call myself a real Underworld fan, the band who I've seen 20 some odd times, I've flown back to New York to see, and around the country. I followed them around the country years ago.
Oh
wow! And I was like, all right, we should really watch this movie. And so because they were originally called
Freud, something like that. Yeah, they're a Welsh new wave band if people aren't familiar. And they did the entire score for this movie.
Yeah, and so I was like, well, I'd love to hear their score for this film, because the only other film they've scored, actually Rick Smith scored the Danny Boyle film Trance.
Oh, no kidding!
And they also did the music for the Olympics for Danny Boyle. As well, for the London Olympics, the opening ceremonies. So I was like, all right, and I'm familiar with the earlier stuff, and some of the Freud stuff, but I was like, I really would love to hear them score, see what the score is like. And so that was kind of the impetus for choosing this film. That's also it's Clive Barker.
And also, we've never seen it before.
We've never seen it. Right.
Yeah, either one of us. We're like, how have we not seen this before?
Right.
And so at least for me, that was my impetus for it. And then obviously with Clive Barker, who we both love, a lot.
And I'll have you know, we went to the video store to pick this one up too.
Did you really? Oh,
yes.
Amazing.
we went to Videotech over in Pasadena.
Oh, hell yes.
Yeah, and awesome. So and they had it. It was it. It hadn't been rented out.
Who would have thought it wasn't in high demand? So we were lucky.
That's crazy. I mean, because people must have been expecting we were going to cover this soon.
Right.
People are probably preparing.
Right. Indeed.
The holidays,
right.
Tis the season. Yeah.
Indeed. So that was that in a nutshell is kind of what brings us to watching this film in particular.
That's amazing. That's crazy because I was looking up a little bit. I wasn't familiar with the band, except I believe. Am I crazy? Did they appear on the Trainspotting soundtrack?
Yes.
Is that Born?
Right.
Is that
them?
Yes. Yeah. Maybe the best song on the Trainspotting soundtrack.
Absolutely.
This band. They did this entire score for this movie, and I will say, my first note was, okay, the vibes in this movie are kind of impeccable. Immediately we have these neon lights, and everybody's looking kind of cool and weird, and it's sort of a vague Blade Runner-ish, neo-noir kind of energy, and the score just kind of rips the entire time.
100%.
It's really good.
Yeah,
I read on the aesthetic after a little bit because it started to feel a little forced for me. I'm just starting okay, and maybe they're running up against some budgetary constraints, but the music was consistently amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely. I read some IMDb user reviews, which are very credible sources for where to get your information from. And Dave J in the Empire of the Bees book doesn't speak particularly highly of the score to this movie, which I think is wild. And
That's crazy.
The score is pointed out in some of the IMDb reviews I was reading too. People were making fun of the music. I was like, this music rips. It's fucking awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's when they were Freud, they were a synthwave band, and then when they actually changed the name of the band to Underworld. When they sort of changed the lineup of the members.
Yeah,
and
because it's oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say then it became Underworld Mark 1, then Underworld Mark 2, when they became now just full on electronic.
Yeah, because if you want to be reductive, you could be oh, it's Vangelis or Tangerine Dream or someone else that would be scoring these kind of ambient synth scores, but I don't care. I don't care if it kind of sounds like something else. It sounds good.
I don't.
Right,
this
exactly.
Is catnip for me. This This is the kind of music that makes me give like a full extra star to my review of The Keep. Like,
yes,
like, or you know, like, which is a movie that is literally unfinished. Like, it is a movie that does not make sense, but it's got the amazing vibes and amazing music. And this actually kind of reminded me in moments of the score for The Keep.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And it's like you said, you know, if there's a movie that I'm watching that's like, okay, I'm all right with it, but then it's got this amazing score, amazing soundtrack. I'm like, it's earning an extra star just for that alone.
Oh yeah,
and you know, and we're big soundtrack enthusiasts here anyway, so we get a lot of stuff. You know, when it comes out, Waxwork and different Mondo and so forth. So of course, my first thing was I'm watching the end of this movie, and it says soundtrack available on CBS Records. So I immediately go to Discogs to see if there's possibly a copy of this running around out there somewhere.
Oh,
no luck yet. I don't know if it even. I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know if they. Who knows? Point is that they're not available. But it was at one time available on a soundtrack.
This sounds like my this sounds like my quixotic search for the Black Roses soundtrack, which on vinyl, which I did eventually find. So I believe in you. Stick with it. You can find it.
All right, good. Very good.
Yeah, no, this it's so much fun, the music, and like yeah, you might raise, you know, your rating on The Keep a star, but you know what The Keep doesn't have? Slow motion champagne pouring.
It's true.
Oh my gosh.
True. Yeah, you know,
you're talking about the whole intro, right? Like,
I love the whole intro so much. I don't care if it's like a silly aesthetic. Like, I was like, they're leaning into something and they're going for it.
It's such a time capsule. Everything about that intro, you know, within seconds. You're like, I know exactly when this was filmed. That style,
It seems like Patrick Nagel is live drawing the entire opening scene here. It's just like,
dead. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Man.
Yeah, it's very informed also by, like, I think we brought this up before in something that was really 80s that we covered too, but it's like this movie clearly was in production within, you know, 18 months or so of Flashdance.
Right.
And like that imagination segment from Flashdance, I feel like you can see that in this a lot too, like in the fashions and in this, like, almost like, it's almost like everyone just like doing these mundane tasks like pouring champagne and turning their neck sideways is doing like a piece of performance art.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a high-end like perfume commercial or the like
I know we've mentioned so many different things it reminded us of, whether it's the way it looks, the stylistically, but within 15 minutes, the two things that I was like, oh my God, Mark, this reminds me of The Hunger a bit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like,
oh, sure. I didn't even think of that one.
You know, that smoky, like exactly what you guys were saying, that smoky lens where it feels like an extended music video. Mm-hmm. Like you guys were just saying, like, what's another excuse for him to show off the red streaks in his hair, you know, with the certain lighting. But yeah, I was like, oh, it reminds me of The Hunger, like a music video almost. And the other thing it reminds me of was, I'm not the biggest James Franco fan, but I do like Faceless, and it
James Franco.
I'm just Franco. James Franco.
Oh,
Franco. Sorry. Yeah. Clearly, I'm not and it kind of has that like that Faceless sort of gritty underground,
100%.
You know, surgical, like, you know.
I thought for a second you were somehow going to connect this to Spring Breakers, and I was going to say this is going to be really impressive.
Well, the neon, they both have the neon, so I guess that would be a good connection.
But yes,
you know what? I don't know, Craig and Amber, if you guys are familiar with this movie, but Steve, you know what I was thinking a lot during this too was like there were moments in here where it was like the aesthetic was so in your face, but the movie is so sort of like muddled and borderline uninterested in where it's going. It reminded me of Vicious Lips.
That was kind of what I ran into as well. I think, like, this movie comes out of the gate pretty strong. It's like, all right, you got my attention. Like, it's weird. It's kind of like neo-noir. And then the pacing just kind of grinds to a halt, you know, and then we're just kind of in for this long slog until, you know, I think things pick up a little bit when the mutants come into the picture, but it is 45 minutes after this before they finally start to show up.
Yeah, it does take some time. You get to see the cool car.
Yeah.
You know, and Steve Burkhoff is, you know, it's funny because I'm watching it. You mentioned in the beginning that it's Beverly Hills Cop. I was like, I knew there was some 80s studio action. For a second, I thought it was one of the Lethal Weapons, but you're right. It was Rambo and then Beverly Hills Cop.
Yeah, he may even have been a Lethal Weapon. No, that's Joss Ackland. Okay.
Yeah, that's the example. It's Joss Ackland. And so, you know, and look, if your lead isn't what's the word I'm looking for? Entirely charismatic.
That was the word I was going to use. Yeah.
For a story like this, because I mean, look, you know, Barker wants to be the Raymond Chandler of the horror set, which I love.
Right. Well, I
clearly loves that film noir thing. And look, Bakula in Lord of Illusions, he's good. And you know, he's and I think didn't Thomas Jane play Harry D'Amour at one point as well in another
oh, I might have missed that one. Yeah, I didn't know.
I may be wrong, but the point is that like there's definitely, again, we talked about earlier before about how these are sort of the prototypes for later things to come from Barker.
Yeah,
I feel like the Bane character is similar to the Harry D'Amour character in that way.
That's a really good point, Mark. Like, I didn't think that like this really. I totally forgot about Lord of Illusions, and this really does feel like, you know, this sort of, those movies sort of bisected off of this one. You know, it's like it's mitosis or something, and they're just kind of like budding off, and it's like, and they're each of those movies is kind of refining some of the concepts that are sort of like half-assed here. So we get like Nightbreed gets the more mythical, like underground society of mutants and monsters thing right, and then Lord of Illusions gets the horror noir thing a little bit more right, you know. And both of those are movies with flaws, but I think they are generally like pretty solid and really interesting, and in a way, and they're much more propulsive and infuses it with much more of that Clive Barker like kinky weirdness that I think we're just kind of missing.
See, this, it's funny because I like the idea of crushing these all together, you know, in this early version, but it does lack the kinkiness that.
Yeah, we got the version with the horror cut out of it. It's really
apparently when I was reading some stuff about it online after we watched it, I guess Barker was in an interview saying that they had taken out a lot of the really graphic stuff or really the gory stuff, and I guess, you know, I don't know if there was any kinky stuff in an earlier version of this, but it's very it's very chaste for a Barker film, even though it opens in a brothel. Ingrid Pitt is the madam,
which, by the way, I didn't even realize it was a brothel. I just thought it was like a 80s party. Just look at this, like it could be just a party, you know.
Yeah, she makes a good point. There, you know, it's champagne, drugs. I mean, I figured it's an 80s party.
It didn't seem sleazy enough, like you thought it would be if it was a brothel to me. You know,
we get like the tiniest bit of like maybe gender bending or like some gay kink in that club, you know, but like it's past. It's not really the vibe of it. And I think I agree with you about Larry Lamb's kind of core lack of charisma in this part. Like he does not, he's not pulling off the stripes. He just doesn't look like he has the face for it. He just doesn't
earn his stripes.
He's not. He needs to be at least 20 years younger to be pulling that off.
Well, you know, we're talking about like neo-noir with sci-fi. I mean, they definitely kept sci-fi elements in this and took the horror elements out. But like, this is not as successful. I even feel comfortable coming right out and saying this, even though there's things I liked about it. This isn't as successful as like Trancers, which it was reminding me of, because it doesn't have Tim Thomerson, who carries that movie in a lot of ways.
And like, Thomerson has played roles like this before. He's that kind of guy for this. And
I think like Larry Lamb needed to be a little more of a Jack Death type in this movie.
He's like it's because Thomerson, like, you know, he comes from a stand-up comedy background, so he knows the right amount of wink to put on the performance. And I think a little bit of wink, a little bit of scoundrel from this lead actor would have been very, very welcome. I think mostly what I'm just getting is like bored thug who's pretending to be tough. Like I never really I don't know. I'm really taking Larry. I'm setting up a rack of lamb here, but no, I am.
But he's going up against Burkoff. I mean, and then there are those two henchmen that they send to bring Larry, bring Bane to see. What's Mother's Go?
By the way, other thing. What's with these names?
Clive Barker names.
Great names.
I was like, wait, what? And then the other guy.
Dr. Savory.
Savory. Like, not quite savory, but Savory. Like, what are these names?
And I'm wondering because this I haven't seen anything Larry Lamb, what else he's been in, but I mean, he's worked in he's had a career for spanning 40, 50 some odd years apparently. So
yeah.
But I don't know if it's the direction, because look, I'm not a Rawhead Rex guy.
Yeah. You're not a Rawhead? A rawhead head? Yeah.
No, and I gave it a couple of tries over time, and I'm not that guy. But so maybe he was directed, to be kind of sort of a little more bland than he should be as for this character. But those long gaps in terms of excitement of the story getting to where we're trying to get to, where it's basically monsters versus mobsters, I guess you could call it.
I think
you need someone to really hold the story together, and with a little more charisma.
No disrespect to George Pavlou, but I genuinely think now, watching this after watching Rawhead Rex, is that it's just not. He's not really the right person for these projects. He's not really up for the task of what they're trying to do. I know when he and Clive Barker met, they got along well, and they struck up this kind of conversation where it was they were talking about this kind of fortuitous potential future of being a writer-director team, like a Stuart Gordon and Dennis Paoli, where they would make all these things together. But it just doesn't really work. Barker obviously has the chops as a writer, and you were saying before how so much of the script was changed. The concept of the script is kind of the same. The finished product is sort of kind of what Barker's screenplay was about, but what I read was that there was only 7 lines of dialogue that were kept from the original first Clive Barker draft of the script. So he's got a screenwriting credit, but most of what's there is not his.
I think both this and Rawhead Rex got kind of noted to death. And Barker's been on the record of saying he just didn't like the design of the ogre that they came up with in Rawhead Rex, and just so it's telling that I think we get this in 85, we get Rex in 86. By 87, Barker is directing his own films. Hellraiser, and I think Hellraiser is kind of a snooze in a lot of ways, but it's also definitely more visually consistent and has some real horror bona fides that this movie just kind of lacks. There is a pretty solid storyline buried in here somewhere. I like this idea of this drug that runs a real risk of mutating you and turning you into a monster, but you're still craving this drug, and this weird idea that this one girl is not being affected by it, and then she turns out to maybe have witch powers or something. I don't know what happened by the end of this.
It's so unclear. And then our lead gets shot in the back of his neck with the needle towards the end, and we kept going, when is the drug going to affect him? Here we are, assumingly 20, 30 minutes into the movie more, or their storyline. And we're I guess he's amazingly unaffected too.
Yeah.
I mean, I was expecting, because they keep talking about you can bring, it was something like your dreams can be visibly visualized or brought to reality.
Yeah.
And she kind of does this weird thing with the glowing eyes to Denham Elliott's character. And he kind of screams, and then his face comes off. But that was it. And, to the point where they set up all these great ideas that would work in a horror film. And then the edges kept getting sheared off to the point where they forgot about all that stuff. And now it's just a bunch of mutants living under the, underground, trying to get high, and it becomes a weird anti-drug PSA.
And speaking of the mutants, I think, like I said, the movie does get a little bit more interesting when they enter the picture, but I still wanted them to be so much weirder. This feels like such like a first draft idea for how these designs should look.
Good way to put it. Yeah.
Like take the guys in, again, I'm gonna pull a Nightbreed again, but like the signature guy you think of for Nightbreed kind of looks like Mac Tonight, and he's got the weird like kind of crescent moon shaped head, and I'm like, there's another guy who's just like walking around and he's got like a face in his stomach. Like there's all these amazing creature designs in that movie. And I feel like that's where you can get more into like a horror element, and then kind of bring in some of this like mythic stuff that Clive Barker clearly enjoys. But this just feels like, all right, let's just glom some on. We'll figure out what this looks like.
Right, we'll put a bubble on this side of the cheek. Or whatever. They missed an opportunity to maybe have some more fun.
And then when they first come in and they're all running into kidnap Nicole and take her out of there, and they're all wearing these strange masks and all this other trench coats and stuff like that. And then which I think was an interesting way to kind of reveal that they were mutants later on. But once they start talking about, hey, we're going to do this and go get the doctor and everything, it's like they're just there. None of them have any personality. And it's just they've got makeup appliances on their faces, really, and that's all they are. That's the depth of their characters as these drug-addled mutants.
The introduction of the mutants was interesting though, because like when they're going to do the first kidnapping and they're all just kind of dressed up like the Foot Clan.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's like that took me by surprise, because I wasn't really sure. Like I was watching the movie and I'm like, I know vaguely what so to be. We didn't really say this before, but I think it kind of maybe goes without saying that like this is one of the rare times where we have 4 people on this show now who all watch this for the first time. Because like usually we have like either it might be a first time watch, but sometimes I'm sometimes on my second of some of these, or the guest picked this movie specifically and Steve and I haven't seen it, but they have. So like we're all experiencing this for the first time. And I remember like the movie starts and I just kind of had this thought of like, I was not expecting ninjas, or like what look like ninjas.
You're like, what's going on? Are they chasing each other? Are they? Yeah.
And it felt like the aesthetic that they were working with just wasn't really consistent. So when you're bringing in these mutants and they've got like these kind of like ninja e-punk outfits, it's way clashing with the sort of neon tinted noir thing they're doing with the rest of the movie. So they're just kind of clumsily crashing together, and it just does feel like a movie that was kind of noted to death.
It is kind of a movie loaf, because we've we've been naming all of these influences and all these other things, and it's like it does kind of bring, which is sort of like what the experience of watching this movie is like. It's like there's not quite enough to grab you, so you think about, what is this reminding me of? And Craig, I know from your email alone, you had to love some of this Argento lighting in this movie.
Oh, you mean, yes.
Mark, you mean.
Oh, is it Craig?
Yeah.
Is that the second time I said that? I think I'm confusing. I think I said Craig before too, because I think that name and your last name is a person I know.
Oh, it's funny. That's so funny.
So if I said that, Steve, you don't have to go through and edit that out laiter. But if you want to,
if you're listening at home, if he says the name wrong, take a shot.
Yes, I'm a huge, obviously, I'm a big fan of all things Argento, and there's definitely that palette in there for the lighting and the color, and again, it's one of those things, like you said, it's a movie loaf. It's an amalgam of so many different things together, which I think is why when we finished watching it, Amber and I kind of looked at each other, and the question always is like, well, what were your thoughts? And as we were talking about what we both felt about the film, the more I was talking about what I liked, the more I realized that I liked the film quite a bit, because it is so many different things all at the same time, and it's trying to do so many other things, and the final result is really just it's unique in its own weirdness and its own inability to achieve what I guess Clive had attempted or had in mind originally.
Mark, what you're saying completely, because that was where I came down on Vicious Lips, and I was kind of the one of the Steve and myself and our guest on that episode who they were kind of like, the aesthetic is kind of cool, runs out really quick. This movie doesn't know what it's doing. The end. And I was way more charitable towards it for the reasons that you're saying. I want to pull, but it's funny because like George Pavlo, he had a quote where he was talking about, they did a mid-shoot interview where he was talking about the movie, and these words are from his mouth. So you'll see this is a very good amalgamation of what was going on in his brain. You'll find elements of Joe Dante's work, Spielberg, Italian cinema, especially Dario Argento's Suspiria and Inferno, and of course David Cronenberg. The lighting, for example, is very Argento influenced.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's quite the stew, right? I don't know why all my metaphors are food today, but
hey, no, I get it. But
did you say they pulled that quote mid shooting it?
Yes.
While they were filming it. Okay.
Yeah,
so it's funny.
Wow.
It's funny you mentioned that because I could see the Inferno influences for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. The way it's the lighting, the color scheme. I mean, everything about the visual palette of it. I don't know necessarily about Suspiria, but I do feel like Inferno hits it on the head where he's concerned there.
Yeah.
All the other elements of it. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of everything sort of sprinkled in there. And look, at the end of the day, you want a movie that's going to be everything instead of just being boring, right? You want something that's going to make you go, hey, that was, even if you didn't like it, at least you go, okay, that was strange, but at least it's something different. Or at least there was 40 different things that were all different.
Well, speaking of a different thing that was in there, and I know I'm a huge De Palma fan. Amber, you're a De Palma fan. I'm assuming Mark is too. Steve, I know, likes certain things.
I'm coming around.
Yeah,
fair enough.
I'm with Steve. I like some other ones I'm not as.
All right, I'm more of an apologist. For some things and a hardcore stan for others, but you were talking about like all of these different things coming together in this movie, but I was like, you know what this movie shares with a movie that Steve and I both love? It almost turned into a Frankie Goes to Hollywood video for a second.
Sure did. Yeah, I was going to bring it up. Yeah. Yeah, a movie that I've gone from liking ironically to just genuinely loving. That's been my journey with Body Double. I'm just kind of on board much. Yeah, it's fucking rips. Yes. But I think that's the problem that I was running into. Like, I can certainly appreciate the idea, like that they took a big swing here. They took a couple of big swings, and they're like, it's his first feature film, first screenplay. Like, they really want to go big and like, plant their flag in a way. I think the problem I kept running into is that they were drawing from all these disparate elements, and I just kind of kept wishing I was watching one of those movies.
Oh,
it was. I was running into that, like, oh man, Suspiria is a good movie. I should watch Suspiria. Like things like that. Yeah.
And it's like when you eat a cauliflower pizza. You're like, hey, I wish it was real pizza.
Yeah, it's pretty good, but you know what's better? Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Amber, I want to ask you while you're here, like, just real quickly, not to go too far off topic here, but like, gun to your head, what's your favorite De Palma?
Oh, my brother.
Oh boy.
You said not to go.
She has an answer for that. She has an answer.
I mean, it's an extension of my soul as Scarface.
Really?
Okay.
I talk about this with so many of my friends that are also De Palma fans, and how that's not even on the top of their list. And I'm like, that's okay, but Scarface is, oh my gosh, it's my Suspiria to him.
Okay.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I like Scarface a lot. I think Scarface is a movie that was unfairly sort of criticized at the time that it came out, and then it's kind of gotten this weird Second Life and Reputation, where people kind of are hold it up, but sort of for the wrong reasons. And I think it's like it's a really great movie that's critiquing, like 80s excess and stuff. And like, I think it's and I really like it for that reason. I feel like there was an old John Mulaney joke where he was saying it was a bad movie and saying how people compare it to like The Godfather, and I'm like, that's a totally different movie. Like not even similar genre to be compared. I think I would probably have to go Blowout. I think Blowout's my favorite.
Okay.
Blowout's pretty incredible.
So much fun. Yeah. So much fun. Really clever. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Scarface definitely falls into that category of movies that the fans ruined without understanding it. Wolf of Wall Street.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All the Big Lebowski, even I think.
That's a good one. That's a good example.
Adopted it and sort of tainted its cultural influence. But then you go back and watch Scarface, kind of free of all that, and you're like, oh yeah, this movie rips. What are you talking about? This movie is in no way condoning what he's doing. I don't know what kind of an idiot you have to be.
It's like even when I tell people like how I tell you, oh, Scarface, I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally sound like the college frat boy with like the poster in my dorm room. And I'm like, it's totally a different profile blog. Although when I do watch like some of the behind the scenes or the anniversary, like, making of, and when they interview all these, talking heads who love the movie, and you'll get somebody like, I don't know if it was Snoop Dogg or some thug that goes, I watch this movie once a month for like my drive and inspiration. There is a part of me that goes, yes, absolutely, make that, and then wait, I don't fit that profile, no, but I kind of get it, but.
I mean, to be clear for listeners who can't see the visuals, they do not have a Scarface poster on the background. There is a big John Belushi one that says college. I see a Carmen Electra bikini picture.
Pulp Fiction.
That looks like a Ferrari. So I think the Scarface one was first.
Jennifer Aniston, centerfold.
Oh my gosh.
Farrah Fawcett, you guys look young. I didn't think you had that one up there.
Farrah's timeless.
Oh yeah. Oh, I hard agree.
Absolutely timeless.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Too funny.
Yeah, no, this is not entirely a successful movie, but I'm gonna ask a question here, and it's gonna sound like I'm making a joke or I'm being really facetious. It is sort of an inside joke between me and Steve, but I'll ask Steve, what are you gonna watch sooner again? Transmutations / Underworld or Blade Runner?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's an interesting choice. I don't know. We have a long and complicated history with Blade Runner, of this movie that we've both really been trying to love for like our entire lives, and
which I'm sorry to interrupt. Which version are you trying to love? Because there's only 9.
Yeah, that's the thing. I like 6.2. Yeah. But version 7.1 has its charms as well. No, but
well, that's the thing. I only listen as a rule to movies with a voiceover.
Oh yeah.
So there's only one cut of that I can watch.
And I want that voiceover to be grouchy and really upset to be doing it. Yeah.
Funny when I saw Blade Runner when I was younger, and then as I'm older and watched it more and more, I was never into the narration. I was like, I felt like, let me just see the movie. And then all these different versions that have come out over time, I've started to kind of go back to the narration version.
Interesting.
And it's in its most basic form at this point, because it's been re-edited and recut and redone so many times now. It's almost lost its original meaning. It almost feels like it lost its original feel at this point.
Well, this is a whole tangent, but like, I know for so long the debate was whether or not Deckard is an android or whatever, and then like the director's cut seemed to pretty much confirm that it is, but then everything else since then has scrubbed that from the universe. So like, to the point where 2049 comes around, I don't actually know if Harrison Ford's a robot and he's just aging, or I don't know what's really going on.
Yeah, I mean, I at one point I thought it was made clear, at least in 2049 it felt like it was made clear.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, that's one of those titles that's gotten so it's the way it's changed so much over time that it's almost lost its meaning at this point.
Yeah, but
no one has to apologize.
Say, yeah,
the proper way to talk about this movie is to talk about other movies. Like
Look,
the proper way to do the podcast
about
about
this
movie is
right
to
now.
talk
We're
about other movies.
Every corner we turn, it's another reference. Yeah.
We're just hitting all of our usual bugaboos here. Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess that's where I came down from it. Like, I will still have a lot to say about Blade Runner in a couple of years. I don't think I'll remember that I watched this one.
I only really asked that because Steve and I we were on another podcast recording, doing an episode on Blade Runner, and we didn't really come out saying that we loved it. Like, we kind of talked about things we like about it and things we don't like about it. And I remember, like, when that episode came out, it being met with people kind of just being like, wait a minute, you guys don't love this movie? There's a lot of like negative backlash to it.
Right.
And I was like, oh man, I didn't realize that was like such a hot take to have. But
yeah.
But I did go to see, I went to see, I guess it was the final cut version pretty recently at a screening. And again, I came down the same way, which is like the miniature work and the map painting stuff is phenomenal. And it looks gorgeous, and the production design and the art design of the movie are amazing. I just get like, I don't know, like I get a little bit bored in the story itself. And I mean, I'm obviously not bored whenever either Daryl Hannah or Rutger Hauer are on screen in that movie.
Yeah.
Right.
But it just doesn't, something about it doesn't just click with me. But I can totally sit back and be like, those kind of technical aspects of it are absolutely masterful. Since this is as good a time as any to do it, because we're really going all over the place. I watched a Ridley Scott movie I had never seen kind of recently, and I liked it quite a bit. And I was like, wow, I actually think I like this more than some of his most famous ones. I watched Someone to Watch Over Me.
Oh yeah, pretty
which I had never seen.
With
and
Mimi,
I was like,
Mimi
Rogers and Tom Berenger.
And
Lorraine Bracco.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
what,
watched
80,
it.
That's 87, 80.
Sometime around there, yeah.
Sometime around there, yeah. It's kind of weird, like fallow period in the 80s, like post Legend, yeah. But
yeah,
Black Rain is pretty good too.
Black Rain's kind of fun, yeah.
Black Rain's got again a visual style to it that's amazing.
Yeah, you know what? And you know what? I wasn't thinking this is completely inorganic and insincere, but you know what? I would say while I was watching Transmutations, you know what? I see a little Black Rain influence.
Oh, God. God damn it. Okay. Let's just see what's in this ball real quick. We have Body Double. We have Black Rain making an appearance. We have Blade Runner. We have what else? We have Suspiria.
The Hunger.
We have The Hunger.
Faceless.
We have Duran Duran videos. We have I've lost track.
Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
The Garbage Pail Kids movie? Question
Garbage Pail. Honestly, a little bit. A little bit.
Yeah, no joke.
Oh my
gosh.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, they could have given them all those weird pun names like they give the Garbage Pail Kids in this movie. I mean, Miranda. Well, I actually wait a minute.
Shitface is basically.
I was just going to say, Shitface is the, you know, and then Miranda Richardson's character, where like half her face is messed up, but the other half seems fine, or you know, it's and by the way, Denham Elliott. Yeah, who again we started talking about, who again I think most people know as the Marcus Brody character. Yeah, he hasn't done a lot of horror. No, and so he wasn't really known for that so much. But to see him in this film, you know, he plays a sinister character. Mm-hmm. You know, much like the character, you know, like when he was on the Alfred Hitchcock Presents show. You know, those back in I don't remember what the years were, but. You know, he was always a sort of a killer or someone who had murdered somebody, was on the run or something like that. Yeah. And so, you know, but he's not known for that, for those roles. He's known for Room with a View, or you know, what was the other one? Trading Places or Indiana Jones. Yeah. I mean, he's so. I think he's having fun here. He's definitely bringing a little camp energy that I think is missing.
He gets a fun parlor scene with a gold gun.
Yes, right. And then he's doing when we first meet him, isn't he like he's like performing surgery on one of the addicts or something?
Oh, that's right.
And then he kind of leaves him there, and he gets the gun, and when Bane Bane's character shows up. So he's clearly having a good time with it. At least I think he is. It seems like
it seems to. I mean, there's a real. I think I like to think that if you're a British character actor of a certain age and you get offered a mad scientist part, you sort of take it as a rite of passage.
Yeah,
that's sort of like
it's the law. Yeah.
Yeah, you've made it. You're in the echelon. Like you're a mad scientist. You're Dr. What's his what, and you've got a vial of poison.
Yeah, you're either a mad scientist or you're Dudley Moore's butler.
And sometimes you're both.
And he's the one who's in love with the Nicole character.
Yeah.
He's doing all this for her. And he, they kind of use her as bait to get him down to the underground to bring all the drugs.
Yeah.
And when he shows up, he's like, oh my goodness, and he just seems to be having a great time with it. And he's a good actor. He's a really good actor.
Yeah.
I've always liked him and stuff I've seen him in. But in this, it was fun to see him in this kind of role, in this kind of film.
Definitely. No, he was having a good time, and it was fun to see him.
My sort of final thought on the movie is I do like the way it does. It kind of does remind you, okay, these are the themes of this movie. This is what this is all about, and it's very Clive Barker, where where Larry Lamb goes through all of this stuff for Nicole, and then is basically like, "Run away with me," and she's like, "No, I'm good. I'm gonna go on good."
I'll look back and just keep going.
She can. Her eyes glow. Her eyes can start glowing now, so she doesn't need him anymore. She's like super natural powers of some kind.
Right. And so that idea of, like the freaks and the outcasts are the kind of purer of heart people, and the evil ones are, us button-up ones up on the surface and stuff like that. That's definitely going to continue to be explored. And I like that aspect of it. So I felt like I said, I think we do get the concept of what Clive Barker wanted this to be, but we get such a kind of abridged version of it with all of the kind of kinkiness and horror taken out of it. So, I may watch this again at some point, maybe just to see if I can get like a little bit more out of it. But I definitely am going to try to track down that soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
And Jared, what you just said and what you asked Steven about, like, would you watch this again, before Blade Runner? You know what? I want to see what you think. I will watch this again with an audience. I'd love to see it with like one of our, the small room screenings. We do like a cinematic. It'd be kind of fun because I can bet you a lot of our friends haven't seen it.
Right.
It'd be fun to watch it with an audience and see what they think.
It's interesting because I don't know. It's not a movie where I feel like the audience reaction or participation level isn't obvious.
Right.
Like things could hit or things could land that you maybe didn't realize, and you could be like, oh, this actually kind of works in an audience setting. Or it could be just go completely off the rails where people just kind of turn on the movie. Right. And it's like, you don't really know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But I got, I would buy that, the 4K. I would own this. I think, and it's, again, it was strange that Kino decided to put this out on 4K.
Yeah.
It was very, very surprising. It's like I didn't realize that there was that much of an audience for this to get a remastered release.
It's a rarity for our show when we're talking about Empire films of this era to be able to find it streaming or rentable anywhere. Like usually we have to dig through the dregs of YouTube. Like we recently watched a movie that was literally a VHS on a TV that someone had pointed a video camera at because that's the only resolution we can find it in. So it's not like,
what movie was it?
Was that Deadly Weapon?
Deadly Weapon,
yeah. It totally lost like 1989, like kind of laser blast remake in a way. We'll be talking about it in a few weeks, but
okay,
really hard to find. And a lot of these movies are like this, but Transmutations has been restored and it's rentable and it's streamable. Yep. You can find it. And like I said,
watched it on Prime Video and it looked gorgeous.
Yeah. We got the 4K disc and it was beautiful. It looked great. They did a great job of it.
So we have
I'd own this. I'd own this for sure.
Really, Rawhead Rex has a really nice like 4K transition too. Like, whatever reason, maybe it's just the association with Clive Barker and they managed his estate a little bit better. But and he is a cinephile and he would take stuff like this seriously, even if it's a movie that he doesn't necessarily put his name to anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting thing, you know. I don't know. We'll see if I would watch it again. Maybe in the right mood. Maybe if Underworld were to perform this score live with the movie playing in the background, like, you know, like they do sometimes with certain films, I would be very into that. I think that might be the circumstance.
I'd go to that for sure.
I know you would.
Yeah, I've been for that for sure.
But well, I think that brings us about to the end. Thank you all so much for taking the time and for talking about these with us. Can you tell us a little bit about what you have going on? Do you have anything to plug or anything to tell people about?
Nothing at the moment. Like I said, Witch Hunter came out in October, and that's, I believe, on all your favorite streaming services now.
Hell yeah.
And check that out. And I think that's pretty much it at the moment.
Amazing. Yeah. We'll definitely check that out. And Jared, where can people find us?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Steve. If you enjoy what we do on the show, then you can jump on to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave us a little 5-star rating, maybe a brief review if you feel so inclined to do so. If you want to keep up with what we've got going on, the best place to do it is Instagram. You can follow the show at puppetmasters_castlefreaks. You can follow me at _Giallo_Jared or Steve at Minotaur Matador. We also post about the show on Threads and Blue Sky and have audio versions of it on our YouTube channel, which we'll hopefully be adding more content to soon. But, you know, it's tough because we're not the only show that Steve records and edits. Steve, what else have you got going on that you want to plug?
Well, I have another show that's called Cinema Arcade. It's cinema and arcade mashed together into one beautiful little portmanteau, because that's what we do. We are watching movies and then playing the video games based on those movies. So we have about 100 episodes in our backlog, including Scarface. If you're interested in checking that one out, we did watch that and play the Scarface game, which is bizarre and action-packed and full of huge celebrities. So worth checking out. And by the time this episode is coming out, I believe we will have just kicked off our original Star Wars trilogy. So that's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. We're going to be talking about the 77, the Star Wars, and then Empire and Return of the Jedi in one big lump. And
you're going to talk about 1.5 good movies?
We're getting whoa.
Wait a minute.
You're coming in hot for someone who's never seen Star Wars before.
Wow. Hold on.
Is that still true? Is that still a true fact about you? Am I doxing you by saying you've never seen Star Wars?
That I've never seen Star Wars?
Yeah.
No, I've seen all of them up to Revenge of the Sith, and then I said never, and then I said never again.
I see. Okay, that's
no.
Fair.
I'm being an asshole. I think the first Star Wars is fine. I think Empire is great. I think Jedi is lackluster. I wouldn't touch anything else with a 10-foot pole.
I'm dreading the prequel series, which we are going to have to do as well. They made a lot of games for those, so we'll be digging into that. But
I played that pod racer game.
Oh, that one's like one of the better ones. Yeah,
that game was great.
Yeah, that was really fun. Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to talk about things not to dread, just listen to what we've got coming up next week. Steve,
dear
what
Lord,
are we doing next week?
I don't know if I can say that necessarily, but we're going to have a very sharp shift in tone here. We're going to be talking about a pretty recent movie, a pair of movies from 2022, The Distant Future. We're going to be talking about, oh, dear Lord, brace yourself for these. Attack of the 50-Foot Cam Girl and Giantess Battle Attack. Yes, this is a franchise, 2 movies about cam girls who get giganticized by another mad scientist and have to have kaiju-style battles over Los Angeles. It happens all the time. You know, I'm sure we're all familiar with that. But yes, we're talking about those 2 deeply wild films with an awesome guest. So definitely check that one out. It's a lot of fun. And we've got a bunch of great stuff for you coming out the rest of this year. Happy New Year to everybody. This is the first one that you're going to be hearing in 2025. And I hope it's going to be a good one for everybody.
Absolutely. Indeed. Thank you again to Mark and Amber for joining us. Thank you, everybody who is listening. And we will see you next week for, I'm so glad I get to say this, Attack of the 50-Foot Cam Girl and Giantess Battle Attack. See you next time.